know the kids learn through play, right? But why does play have to stop when it's time to eat? All of a sudden, when it's time to eat, we get super serious, right? Like, where did that come from? Why wouldn't play continue when there's food?
Are meal times a serious struggle? Does your child eat a limited number of foods? Does your child eliminate entire food groups? Are you tired of waiting for them to just grow out of it? Welcome to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater, where you'll learn strategies to help your picky eater expand their palate. With Christine Marati-Yoder, a pediatric feeding specialist, speech pathologist, mom of a child with feeding issues, and author of Mealtime Mindset. Let's get started. Here's Christine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to actually say thank you and thank you again. If you have not already subscribed, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss anything. I post a new podcast episode every week, and I then put that episode on YouTube as well, along with some other short little video clips and tips and things like that. So if you are not subscribed, please take a moment to do that. And this month, we are talking about all things fun because really just in general, July for me is typically viewed as a month of fun, or at least it was for really all of my childhood. So now you might not be thinking fun when you think of July because, well, your kids are home from school or maybe they're off to camp. But it's like sometimes it's like that like chaotic time where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to find like ways to entertain them. And a lot of parents I feel like want to rush through the summer and they can't wait till the kids are back in school. But at the same time, they get a little stressed out because they also notice around this time that their kids are not eating normal amounts of food. They eat the same kind of foods every day. And a lot of times this gets reflected back to them as like, oh my gosh, like they're still eating these foods and another year has gone by. What are we going to feed them this fall when they return to school? So I know for a lot of parents, fun is not usually the word you might be thinking of in July. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I'll try to say a few things that will maybe like hopefully ease your mind. One of them is that you don't have to like freak out at this time of year. I would really try to make the most of it actually, and do things that are fun. Now, like I said in the last episode, I found it was super important to do things that you also found fun, because if you are just going through the motions and you're kind of like miserable and you're like, well, I just like have to do this because I have to. No one's going to enjoy themselves. No one's going to have fun. So, I say take little pieces of this, little pieces of what I say, and you can incorporate some of them, not all of them, not every single one you're going to want to do on this list that I give you. Not every single tip and strategy is going to work for every single kid. But that's why I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. That's why we do episodes for a lot of different types of people. And so, if something doesn't resonate with you, don't feel like you have to do it if you think it's going to make you miserable. Because for some parents, like what I'm going to suggest sounds like torture to them. And I would say then don't do it. We can find a different strategy, a different approach that will work for everyone. Right. So don't stress that you feel like, oh, I have to make food fun. There's probably something on this list that you will find, or maybe even at least, some your partner or someone, I know for a lot of parents, someone might be into sports, right? So we could find a way to incorporate sports with food and into something that they really like, right? So, so I'd say don't stress out too much, and I guess that's my main message. Don't feel like you have to do everything. I would really just pick one thing. Try to do one action per day. If you have a picky eater and you're like, we're really going to work on food this summer, like just pick one action a day, and it could be such a small action. Does not have to be like you've created this whole activity. It could literally just be having them help you move food from a bowl to a pan. It might take 20 seconds or less, and that could be your one action for the day, and that's totally fine. Um, just every day, just taking at least one action will have a snowball effect. So don't think that everything has to be like a whole big game, right? So I'm listing out today a lot of games, but I'm not saying like every day you should maybe do this whole big game activity. They're great ideas, but I feel like if someone really takes this to heart and they're like, well, we're going to do a new game every day, or we're going to do a game in the morning and a game at dinner, I think you're going to end up stressing yourself out, burning yourself out, and you're going to just throw away all the strategies and you're just going to give up and go back to what you were doing before. And I don't want you to do that. I just want you to take some small actions that might lead to some bigger actions. But for those who are ready or who really enjoy the activities and making and doing games and playing together, then today's episode is going to be perfect for you. And if you're not that type of person at all, don't stress. Don't feel like, oh, well, Christine said all these games and like that sounds like horrible to me. Like, but I guess I have to do it because she's the expert, right? No, then just don't do it. You're the expert because you're going to trust and you're going to hear things that will resonate with you. And that's how you'll know, oh, I should do that one. Like something I might say, and it might not be today's episode, it might be in a different episode, but I might say something and you're like, wait, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to incorporate that. Like, that sounds like a good idea. That sounds like something I could do. That sounds like something that might work. Whatever it is, whatever piece of advice that you hear, your internal guidance system will tell you if it's a great idea or not. So, with that, let's jump in. So, the topic of fun is important to me because I think that sometimes we forget to have fun. Sometimes we know that kids learn through play. That's pretty well documented information that kids learn through play, and people have built whole businesses around it. There's Love Every, and there's a Montessori approach, and there's Montessori toys, and we know the kids learn through play, right? But why does play have to stop when it's time to eat? All of a sudden, when it's time to eat, we get super serious, right? Like, where did that come from? Why wouldn't play continue when there's food? And really, there isn't like a good reason. I think it really just, like everything, it goes back to our childhood. What do we know? What is our expectation based on the experiences that we've had as children? So if your experience was, no, you sit down and you eat your food and you don't talk, or you sit down, you eat the food, you don't get up until the plate is clean, or whatever. Maybe it wasn't like that. Maybe you had a totally different experience. And by the way, please comment and tell me what your experiences were, because I do really want to hear, because I only have my own experience to go off of. So I really do want to hear what other people had as their experience. But where was I? what oh yeah, so I was talking about past experiences. So, if that's your past experience where you're just, you have to like do something and then move on, right? Like you're going to eat and then you're going to move on and play. But there, like I said, there really isn't like a good basis for that. It's just our experience. So, can we change that belief of what mealtime's supposed to be like or supposed to look like? And maybe when we do change that thought around mealtime and what it should look like or feel like or sound like, maybe then we can see some shifts and things are going to change, but maybe they'll change for the better. So, I ask you to keep an open mind with some of these games, and I wouldn't necessarily tie the games to a meal, especially not at first. I would say keep them as like a separate activity. I would not make games like the primary focus of any meal, right? So in my mind, a meal, while fun, while you can make it fun, it's to take in nutrition, get your, calories, your vitamins, whatever you're going to need to get energy to play. Right? That's how we always present it to kids. Like, you need to eat food so you have energy so you can continue playing. So you kind of fuel up, literally. Your food is your fuel. And, then you can move on and you could do something else. But of course, there's ways to make it fun within the mealtime. And this is actually, sometimes when we talk to parents about scheduling sessions, they say, well, their mealtime is, at this time. So, you have to come at this time. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we're not working on them completing their meal. That's something you're going to do at home with them. We're working on skill building, and skill building happens outside of mealtime. So I always do suggest that for when you're doing things like these games I'm going to talk to you about, that's like a separate activity that would happen like maybe at like a snack time, but even in between, it doesn't even have to be at a snack time, it doesn't have to be at a designated meal time. I think it could be a game, like, how if you pull out a board game, there's not like a board game time of day. It's just like, hey, let's play a board game. Okay, this is like that. This is that. Hey, let's just play a food game, right? So instead of taking out a board game and you have pieces that you move around and you set up the game, you set up stuff with food and objects, and that's the game, right? So let me get into some of the games that I might suggest. And like I said, of course you can incorporate them into your meals, but don't feel pressure that you have to set up the meal and set up the game and get them jazzed about it, like all at the same time. Because I think especially for some parents, that's just added stress, right? If you're already stressed walking into the meal and then you're like, hey, oh my gosh, now I have to do the game on top of it, like that's just too much. So please feel free, more than free, to do this at a totally separate time of day. It could be after every part of the meal is done, like the whole day has been completed, and maybe this is something you do before bath time, because hey, if you get dirty, you're going to take a bath anyway, right? So that's what I'm talking about here. So, one of the games I'd say is the Snack Stack Challenge. And for this, it's literally, you can just try to build a tower of food. Now, of course, there's no rules to any of these games. So you can do things like who can build a tower the fastest, or who could build the tallest tower, or who can be the most creative in which types of food items they use to build a tower. You can use a combination of foods. You can use just marshmallows. These are actually, I don't know if you've ever done this at school, but I remember doing this specific activity as a team building activity amongst, like, peers, I suppose. So they'd give us like a bunch of marshmallows and some, they might have actually given us toothpicks, but I would say use pretzel sticks, and like build the tallest structure, or build a bridge, or build something, but you have to only use these two objects. And it could be whatever objects you want. It could be whatever type of objects you want to build. There's no real rules, right? So it could be whatever you make up. And you know what? When you give kids some of the control over how the game is played, they get even more into it. So if you're like, well, what are the rules to this game? Like, what should the rules be? Like, how should the game be played? Like, should it be like whoever builds the tower up to this cabinet line first wins, or whoever builds it in under a certain amount of time wins? Like, when you give them some of the control over the specifics, they're going to be much more likely to get into it. So that's one game. You could do food bingo, which we actually have on our website for free. You can download a bingo sheet. So it's right now it's just shapes, and it could be, finding things in your pantry. It could be finding things in the refrigerator. It could be going to the grocery store, the farmer's market, and searching for objects that have those specific shapes. And whoever gets bingo first, I guess, wins, right? And again, it doesn't have to be that they win something specific. It's just we play to have fun, right? So don't even feel pressure like, well, if they win, then I have to get them a prize. Like, no, you don't have to get them a prize. There's no rules to this. So if you want to get them a prize, great. But I think that's going to put more pressure on you. Um, and totally aside from the money factor, which is not even like a factor at all. Like you can buy something that's 20 cents or $20. It would not matter to me. But the point is that it's okay to just play a game to have fun. It's okay to play a game where, we just help each other out. Maybe there is no winner. Maybe it's cooperative game and we're both doing the same bingo board and we're just one another checking things off and noticing things. Or maybe you're building that tower, but it's not competitive one against the other. It might just be one tower that you're both building together, which is, again, wonderful. These are all not just games for food and fun. It's also bonding. It's also it's just a different way of learning, a different way of interacting. It's good for kids. The bottom line is it is good for kids to do these types of activities. Um, and don't feel like you have to do like hard and fast rules with any of them. Okay. Another game is the blindfold game. So this is definitely something you might do with more advanced kids within the feeding. You're not going to do this with the kids that are afraid to touch food and put it to their lips, right? Um, it might just be, one of their. You can even start with preferred foods for this. Maybe you give them clues. Maybe they don't have any clues. Maybe they just have to use their touch, their smell. And they're blindfolded, so they're trying to guess what food it is. So like if you put a watermelon on the plate, like, and you're just feeling it, right? You might be like, well, it's wet, but that's a good way to get kids to start describing food to you and talking about the properties of food rather than it's yucky, right? We always want to redirect any kind of comments like that to what it feels like, scientist type words. So it's wet, it's a square shape, I feel liquid coming out. It's soft if I squeeze it. Okay, but there's a hard part on the bottom and the top part is much softer, right? So those are all great things. Like those are all great ways to describe food. That's what we're looking for. And it's a fun way. It could be a fun way to taste new foods too. But you could take it as far as you want. It can just be that they touch it and they have to try to guess based on touch and smell. It could be that they get to lick it. It could, right? So, of course, you can make it a competition. You can make it not a competition. You can do whatever you'd like. The choice is yours. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few more tips, but I do want to pause and remind you that if you do need more help with this topic, we have a quiz available for you on our website, foodologyfeeding.com. If you're unsure of where to get started with some of these things, we have free webinars, we have audio downloads, my book, Mealtime Mindset, and a couple other goodies also coming your way. I have more things in the works, of course. So let's get back to it. For if you have a kid who's super artsy and creative, you can just literally have them make art out of food. It could be varied ingredients or maybe just one ingredient, and they have to really be creative with that one ingredient. Maybe they have to make a specific type of picture, like, maybe whoever, maybe they have to stick to a category like, okay, make an animal out of picture and then we'll swap and we'll guess what your animal is, right? Or it could be, it could be anything. It could be anything, but just like creating something out of food, it takes food out of the equation for a minute that it's something that you have to eat, right? So when we can be flexible about how we view food, okay, well, I know that this is food, right? But now I know that it's also for art, right? That's like a new way of seeing food, which makes you more flexible. When you're more flexible, you're more likely to expand your diet and try new things when we have flexible thought. So being creative with food makes you have flexible thoughts around food, which is what in feeding therapy, that is what feeding therapy is essentially. so, so making art out of food would be fantastic. You can get as messy or as not messy as you'd like. You could do foods that are super messy, or you could do foods that are all dry and, easy to clean up. You can make this as wild or as tame as you'd like. Okay. My favorite game that I always play with kids, especially when we evaluate them in person. I don't always evaluate in person, but when I do, I always use a basketball hoop. Now, this is actually for a wastebasket. So you're supposed to actually clip it to the wastebasket, and it hangs. You're supposed to put a ball in it. You're supposed to put paper in it. Of course, I put food in it. So I put it on the wastebasket, and you can be as close or as far. You can use different body parts. Sometimes I'll put it on my head and be like, whoever can get it in from their head, or I'm going to roll it down my arm. Whoever's going to, let's see who gets the closest, or how many baskets can you get? And then we go, once they're comfortable on their different body parts, we go right to the mouth, and we'll do in our lips, we'll do in our teeth. We'll use our tongue to push it out. We'll see which one gets us the furthest shot, right? So this is a fun, easy way to get kids to do things with food and move up that hierarchy with food. We can do alphabet food challenge, which is so fun. Now, of course, for this one, your child would have to know the alphabet first. But assuming that they do know the alphabet, you can make the alphabet out of food. So you can do this with things like spaghetti that's wet or dry. You can do this with pretzel sticks. You could make things into sticks, cut, apples into sticks and make alphabet out of that. You can do the same thing with numbers, counting numbers. This works especially well with kids on the spectrum who have fixations with certain letters and numbers. When they do, it's super fun that they really enjoy and they want to make the letters and they want to, you know, use the food as a letter. Again, that's a new way of looking at food. That's a flexible thought. Okay, food can be something you eat, or it could be something I turn into letters, which I love, right? So we're building another positive association with food by doing that. Okay, and let's see, we'll do one more. Okay, so the colorful cart challenge. You can do this at the supermarket. Bringing your kids to the supermarket with you and seeing how many different items you can put in there that are different colors, right? So something green, something orange, something yellow. You can do colorful shape challenge or just a shape challenge. Like, can you find a star? It's kind of like the bingo game, but instead of just identifying it, they actually have to grab it and put it into the cart. And then, of course, you can use those foods in different games or different activities at home, cooking, cutting. Of course, you can explore those foods more at home, but you don't have to. But it's again just trying to get the food onto their hands. Taking some of that ownership over it, like, oh, this is, showing it to whoever else, oh, I went with mom to the store and look at all of the fun things we found. Like we found a star fruit. I didn't even know that there was a star fruit. And now I found that there's this fruit that's in the shape of a star, right? So like fun things like that, just trying to engage them in the process, engage them with food on any level in any place, outside of the home, outside of maybe something that they are normally doing, someplace fun. All of these things, all these experiences are all building positive associations with food. And that's what feeding therapy is. That's what you want to do. Every time you build that positive association with food, it helps move them one step closer. And we talk about baby steps. snowballing and becoming bigger shifts and changes. But all of these little baby steps of touching and smelling and doing artwork and building and shooting baskets, those are all the steps. Those are all the little baby steps. And every time you pick up a piece of food, or your child picks up a piece of food rather, and does something new with it, that is progress. That is so much progress. And beyond that, I want you to see that as progress, not just see it as like, okay, well, they did it, let's move on to the next. Stop a minute, be grateful for that baby step coming into your reality. So like, oh wow, they never put food on their shoulder before. Now you might be like, well, that's not their mouth, so that doesn't count. No, it does count. That's what you have to realize. Everything counts. If it's a new thing that they did with food, if they put it on their nose and they thought they were being silly because they were trying to balance it like a seal, that is progress. That's something new that they did with food. Taking a bite of food is just something new that you do with food. You assign meaning to those actions. So if you say putting food on the nose is not good, but putting food in your mouth is good, that's just something you made up. That's not true. Putting food on your nose is good too, right? So it's changing our perception around like what these baby steps mean for their progress. And when we start to say and believe, wow, they did something new with food today. Wow, they did two new things with that food when we played that game. That's right. So when you start to recognize that, you're going to start to see more and more and more, right? And this goes you can go very deep into manifesting, but it's the same principle that I talk about in my manifesting course, where I help parents learn how to manifest money so they can get their kids the therapy and the help that they need, and get them the help that they need, the right types of help that's perfect for them and their child and their situation. It's the same principle, whether you're manifesting money, a person to help you, or your kids eating. You still have to be grateful for all of the baby steps and all of the little things in between where you are and your goal, right? So there's no real difference between them. And we are the ones that assign meaning to all of those things. There's no actual good or bad action, right? It's just that's what we've assigned it to be. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed listening to the podcast. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. There's lots of fun tips in here. If you did not already, please take a moment to rate, review, and of course, subscribe, which hopefully you did at the beginning of the episode. When you take that small action, it just helps so tremendously. Any engagement helps move our message forward and allows more people to hear our message and learn new things and change mindset. So I thank you for that. And, I hope you guys have fun playing with some food. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.